Hello students, welcome to another video session. In this video, we are going to discuss about the previous year's questions from last 5 years from the chapter Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. Without getting any late, let's get into the MCQs. First question, it is from NEET 2024 re-exam and the question says, which part of the ovule stores reserve food material? See students, whenever they are asking about reserve food material, I'll tell you a simple logic. The structure which is involved in providing nourishment will have abundant food reserves or reserve food material. For example, if we speak about pollen grain of a two-celled stage, let's say the two-celled stage pollen grain. The two-celled stage pollen grain has two cells. That is vegetative cell and generative cell. And in this vegetative cell and generative cell is going to provide nourishment to the generative cell. Because of this reason, vegetative cell has abundant food reserves. One more example. In anther wall, if we speak about anther wall, in anther wall, tapetum is the layer which is going to provide nourishment for the developing pollen grains. So for this reason, the tapetal cells are considered to have abundant food reserves. One more example. When we speak about the seed, inside the seed, endosperm is going to provide nourishment to embryo. So in this case, endosperm will be having abundant food reserves. So here they are asking about the part of the ovule which stores the reserve food material. So among nucellus, integument, placenta and funicle, nucellus is the right answer because nucellus is going to provide nourishment to embryo sac. Nucellus provides nourishment to embryo sac. Because of this, the nucellus will be the right answer. Second question, it is from NEET 2024 re-exam. And the question says, pollen grains remain preserved as a fossils due to the presence of. So what's the substance which enables the pollen grains to be preserved as a fossils? So it is none other than sporopollenin. And because of this sporopollenin, the pollen grains can withstand extreme temperature, strong acid and alkali, which enables the pollen grains to be preserved as a fossils. And this sporopollenin, where it is present? It is present on the outer layer, that is none other than exine layer of the pollen grain. Exine is made up of sporopollenin, whereas intine layer, it is made up of cellulose and pectin. Cellulose and pectin. So the answer is exine layer. The next question. See, this is a question from NEET 2024 re-exam and it's a diagram based question, and this is a diagram of strawberry which is given in seed section of sexual reproduction in flowering plants, and the strawberry is an example of a false fruit. False fruit means the part other than ovary, it is involved in fruit formation, and in case of strawberry, the structure which they asked us to find is nothing but the thalamus, and thalamus is going to be the edible part in strawberry. And the type of fruit in strawberry, for this reason it is called as false fruit. Other than strawberry, we see the false fruit in case of apple and cashew. The next question. This is a question from NEET 2024. And if you look at this question, they are asking us to find the correct statements among the list of the statements. Now, if we read at the first statement, the flowers of Vallisneria are colorful and produce nectar. See, Vallisneria is a plant which undergoes water pollination. In a plant which undergoes water pollination, they need not be colorful and they need not produce nectar, because being colorful and producing nectar, these are the characteristic features of insect pollinated flowers. So for this reason, the statement A, it is the wrong statement. And the next statement, the flowers of water lily are not pollinated by water. Yes, it is right, because when we look at water lily, in water lily, the flower is going to emerge above the level of water. When the flower emerges above the level of water, then the pollination is going to be air or insect. So because of this, the second statement, statement B, is going to be right. And the third statement, in most of the water pollinated species, the pollen grains are protected from wetting. Yes. So the pollen grains in water pollinated species, they are protected from wetting because of the presence of a mucilaginous sheath. Yes, this is the right statement. So statement A is wrong, B is right, and C is right. And statement D, the pollen grains of some hydrophytes are long and ribbon-like. Yes, it is right. And this ribbon-like pollen grains are seen in case of Zostera, and which is considered as a sea grass. So this is the right statement. And statement E, in some hydrophytes, the pollen grains are carried passively inside the water. Yes. So in some hydrophytes, the pollen grains, they are carried passively inside the water, whereas in some hydrophytes, the pollen grains are carried on the surface of water. In Vallisneria, it is carried on the surface of water, whereas in case of Zostera, the pollen grains are carried passively inside the water. So this statement is also going to be right. So which are the correct statements? Statement B, C, D, and E. So the answer is fourth option. The next question. So if you look at this next question, it is also a diagram based question from NEET 2024, and it is asking about the description of the diagram. Now if you look at this diagram, this is a diagram from sexual reproduction in flowering plant, which is about the wind pollination. Now what is the correct description of the diagram? So the diagram speaks about the wind pollinated plant inflorescence showing flowers with well exposed stamens. Yes, this is the right statement. The next question. So this is the question from NEET 2023 Manipur paper. And the question says, in which of the following sets of families the pollen grains are viable for months together? So the answer is Leguminosae, Solanaceae, and Rosaceae. So in Leguminosae, Solanaceae, and Rosaceae, pollen grains are viable up to months together. Whereas in case of Poaceae family is also called Graminae. The members of Poaceae family also called Graminae, and they are commonly referred as cereals. In cereals like rice, wheat, in these members, the pollen grains are viable. The pollen grains lose viability within 30 minutes. The pollen grains, they are known to lose viability within 30 minutes after their release. Whereas in case of Leguminosae, Solanaceae, and Rosaceae, the pollen grains are viable for months together. These are the important examples what we need to remember from this chapter. And the next question is, transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of another flower of a same plant. Another flower of a same plant. If the pollination is taking place between the two different flowers located on the same plant, such type of pollination is nothing but zytonogamy. And this zytonogamy, it is described as functionally cross pollination. It is functionally cross pollination, whereas it is genetically self-pollination. Functionally cross-pollination and genetically self-pollination. Then the next question. Here the question speaks about the correct sequence of events in formation of a female gametophyte. What is this female gametophyte in angiosperms referred as? Female gametophyte is nothing but embryo sac. They are asking about the correct sequence of events in the formation of embryo sac inside the ovule. So here if you look at all these statements, so what's the first step means? It is going to be the C, meiotic division in the megaspore mother cell. So this is going to be the first step. After meiotic division, what happens? 4 megaspores are formed, and out of those 4 megaspores, 3 of them are going to be degenerated. So this is going to be the second one. And after 3 megaspores degenerate, one is going to become the functional megaspore, and that functional megaspore, it is undergoing 3 successive free nuclear divisions. So this is the third step. And then after this 3 successive nuclear divisions, 8 nuclei will be formed. Out of those 8 nuclei, 6 out of 8 nuclei, they develop the cell wall. So before they develop the cell wall, the 3 nuclei from each pole, they are migrated. So this is going to be the fourth step. And finally, the formation of wall resulting in 7-celled embryo sac. This is going to be the fifth step. So the answer is C, B, A, D, E. So the answer is fourth option, C, B, A, D, E. The next question. What is the function of tassels in the cornucopia? See, tassels are nothing but the thread-like structures what we see in the cornucopia, and these tassels represent stigma and style. So what is the function of these tassels of the cornucopia? These tassels are the long thread-like structures what we see. They are going to flutter in wind, they are going to wave in wind to trap the airborne pollen grains, the pollen grains which are coming from the air. In order to trap those airborne pollen grains, these tassels of the cornucopia, they are going to flutter in wind for the sake of trapping the pollen grains. So the answer is first option, to trap the pollen grains. The next question. Large, colorful, fragrant flowers with nectar are seen in. Previously we have discussed colorful, fragrant flowers with nectar. These are the characteristic features of insect pollinated flowers, because all these features, they are meant to attract the insects. Production of fragrance, production of nectar, and being colorful, having colorful petals. All these features are meant to attract insects for the sake of pollination. So all these features are seen in insect pollinated flowers. The next question. This is another question from NEET 2023, and in this question they are asking, in angiosperm the haploid, diploid and triploid structures of a fertilized embryo sac sequentially. We shall verify each option and will find the correct answer. So the first option, antipodals. So antipodals are the haploid structure, synergids are haploid structure, and primary endosperm nucleus is a triploid structure. So this is not the one. And then the second option, synergids is haploid, and then zygote is the diploid, and primary endosperm nucleus, it's a triploid. So answer will be synergids, zygote and primary endosperm nucleus. So this is the right answer. Here we have an assertion reason question from NEET 2023, and if you look at the assertion, in gymnosperms, the pollen grains are released from the microsporangium and are carried by air currents. I think this is a question from plant kingdom, not from sexual reproduction from flowering plants. We shall go through this. Yes. So in gymnosperm, the pollen grains released from the microsporangium are carried by air currents. Yes, this is a right statement. And if we look at the reason, air currents carry the pollen grains to the mouth of archegonia, where the male gametes are discharged and pollen tube is not formed. This is going to be the wrong statement, because even in case of gymnosperm, the pollen grains land on ovule, and after landing on ovule they are going to form the pollen tube, and this pollen tube discharges the male gamete at the mouth of archegonia, and then it is going to proceed for the fertilization. So here they have mentioned the pollen tube is not at all formed and the male gametes are discharged at the mouth of archegonia. So this is the wrong statement. As a pollen tube formation is going to take place, this statement is considered as a wrong statement. So assertion is a true and the reason is wrong. So A is true and R is false. Option 2. The next question, question number 13, and it is from NEET 2022 phase 2. And the question says, the residual persistent part which forms the perisperm in seeds of beet. What do we mean by perisperm? Perisperm is nothing but the persistent nucellus. The persistent nucellus present in seed, we call it as perisperm. What are the examples of perisperm? We see it in case of beet, and along with beet we see in case of black pepper. Don't confuse between black pepper and bell pepper. Black pepper is the example of a perisperm, whereas bell pepper is a C3 plant which we come across in photosynthesis chapter. Bell pepper is an example of C3 plant which we come across in photosynthesis chapter, whereas a black pepper is an example of perisperm. So the next question, this is from NEET 2022 phase 2, and they are asking us to find the correct answer from the options. And these statements given here, they are related to the hybridization process, and they are asking us to find To ensure that the only desired pollen grains fall on the stigma in artificial hybridization process, what must be ensured? We shall read the each statement and we'll confirm whether it is a right statement or wrong. A female flower buds of a plant producing unisexual flower need not be bagged. So this is going to be a wrong statement because bagging is absolutely required and emasculation is not required in unisexual flowers. There is no requirement of emasculation, but bagging is absolutely required. So this is the wrong statement. And now if we look at the statement B, there is no need to emasculate the unisexual flowers of a selected female parent. Yes, so this is the right statement. And statement C, emasculated flowers are to be bagged immediately after cross pollination. Yes, after cross pollination, emasculated flowers, they again must be bagged, and the process we call it as rebagging, and this has to be done to ensure that unwanted pollen is not landing on the stigma. So this is also the right statement. Emasculated flowers are to be bagged after the removal of anthers. Yes, soon after the emasculation, the flowers must be bagged to prevent the unwanted pollen contamination. This is also the right statement. Bisexual flowers showing protogyny are never selected for a cross. This is not a right statement because even the bisexual plants which undergo protogyny, they can be selected for the cross, and this protogyny ensures that they are mostly cross pollinated because protogyny is an adaptation to ensure cross pollination. So the answer will be B, C and D only. So the answer is third option, B, C and D only. Now the next question. This is the question from NEET 2022 phase 2 again, and they are asking about the composition of an embryo sac in angiosperm. Now if you look at the embryo sac, a typical embryo sac contains one egg cell, two synergids, three antipodals and two polar nuclei. And where are these two polar nuclei present? These two polar nuclei, they are present in a central cell. And here the synergids and egg cell together we call it as egg apparatus. So the answer will be second option. The next question, it is again from NEET 2022 but from phase 1 here, and this is a statement based question. Now if you look at both the statements, statement 1 says that cleistogamous flowers are invariably autogamous. Yes, this is the right statement because the only type of pollination seen in this flowers is self-pollination, so they are invariably autogamous. Cleistogamy is disadvantageous as there is no chance for cross-pollination. Yes, it is disadvantageous because if cleistogamy takes place for generations together, there's an odd genetic consequence called inbreeding depression. So both the statements, they are the correct statements. So the answer is first option. The next question from NEET 2022 phase 1, and the question says identify the incorrect statement. We need to find the incorrect statement related to pollination. Pollination by water is quite rare in flowering plants. Yes, this is a correct statement. Pollination by wind is more common amongst the abiotic pollination. Yes, this is also the right. Flowers produce foul odors to attract flies and beetles to get pollinated. The flowers which are pollinated by flies and beetles, they produce foul odors. This is also the right statement. Moths and butterflies are the most dominant pollinating agent among the insects. This is the wrong statement because among the insects, the most dominant pollinating agents are honeybees. So here they have given moths and butterflies. It's not moths and butterflies. It must be the honeybees. So the answer is option 4. The next question is from NEET 2021, and the question says the term used for the transfer of pollen grains from anther of one plant to the stigma of a different plant during pollination brings genetically different types of pollen grains to stigma. So if it is within the same flower or between the two different flowers of the same plant, it is still the genetically same type of pollen grain. If it is only between two different flowers, this type of pollination brings the genetically different types of pollen grains to the stigma. And what is the pollination between two different flowers located on the different plant? It is nothing but xenogamy. So the answer is xenogamy. The next question is from NEET 2021 and the question says diadelphous stamens are found in. This is a question from morphology of flowering plants. Diadelphous condition means the stamens are arranged in two bundles. Where do we see this condition? We see this condition in case of pea and bean. Nothing but Fabaceae family. In the members of Fabaceae family, we come across diadelphous condition. Now, if you look at the other examples, in China rose, it is the monoadelphous condition. In citrus, it is polyadelphous condition. So, the answer is P. In pea and bean, we see diadelphous condition, where the stamens are organized into two bundles. The next question from NEET 2021. The question says, a typical angiosperm embryo sac at maturity is. This is very important question here. So how do we describe this typical angiosperm embryo sac at maturity? It is considered as a 7-celled 8-nucleate embryo sac. So it is having 8 nuclei and 7 cells. What are those 7 cells? 3 antipodals, 2 synergids, 1 egg cell and 1 central cell. Totally 7 cells and 8 nuclei. So a typical angiosperm embryo sac at its maturity is described as 7-celled 8-nucleate embryo sac. The next question, in some members of which of the following pairs of families the pollen grains retain viability for months after release? This is a question from NEET 2021. So what's the answer? We have already gone through one question very similar. So the answer is Rosaceae leguminosae. Along with Rosaceae leguminosae, one more example will be Solanaceae family. In the families of Rosaceae, Leguminosae and Solanaceae, the pollen grains are viable up to months together. The next question from NEET 2020 phase 1. And the question says, the body of ovule is fused within the funicle at the place where funicle comes in contact with body of ovule. It is described as a hilum. Hilum is a place where funicle comes in contact with body of ovule. So answer is option 2. The next question. So this is a question from NEET 2020 phase 1. The question says, the plant parts which consists of two generations, one within the another. So the plant part which consists of two generations, one within the another. So which are the plant part which consists of two generations? The pollen grains inside the anther. So the pollen grains are gametophyte and anther is a sporophyte. So this will be the correct answer. Germinated pollen grain with two male gametes. It is not considered because the overall pollen grain itself, it's just one generation. Seed inside fruit. Seed inside fruit is not two generations, it's a 3 generation, because there will be a sporophyte, and in the sporophyte there will be a gametophyte, and again in that gametophyte again the sporophyte will be there. The seed inside a fruit, it is not 2 generations, it is considered as 3 generations. So this won't be the answer. So this is not the one. Embryo sac inside the ovule. Embryo sac is nothing but the female gametophyte and ovule is the parent sporophyte. So this is also the correct option. So the answer is 1 and 4. First option. And the next question here, this is the question from NEET 2019. And the question says, what is the fate of the male gametes discharged in the synergid? So what's the fate of the male gametes here? One male gamete, it is going to fuse with the egg, and the other fuses with the central cell nuclei. When it fuses with the egg, that is called as syngamy. When it fuses with the egg, that is called as syngamy. And when it fuses with the central cell nuclei, that is called as triple fusion. So here totally syngamy is one type of fertilization and triple fusion is another type of fertilization. Together we describe this process as double fertilization, and this double fertilization is a characteristic feature of angiosperms. The next question, it is from NEET 2019, and the question says persistent nucellus in the seed is known as. Already we got a similar question. Persistent nucellus is none other than perisperm. Perisperm is nothing but persistent nucellus. And where do we see this persistent nucellus? Persistent nucellus is seen in case of beet and black pepper. The last question from NEET 2019, and the question says which one of the following statements regarding post-fertilization development in flowering plants is incorrect? They are asking about the incorrect statement. Central cell develop into endosperm. This is the correct statement. Ovule develops into embryo sac. Ovule develops into embryo sac. Post-fertilization, this is going to be wrong. Ovary develops into fruit. This is also the correct statement. Zygote develops into embryo. This is also the correct statement. Ovary develops into fruit and ovules develop into seed. It must be the seed, but here they have given embryo sac. So the statement 2 is wrong. So the answer is second option. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content. Thank you.